All right, so let's jump right in. We're going deep today on something pretty cutting edge when it comes to regenerative medicine, and something that I think can make a big difference for a lot of practices out there and for a lot of patients. We're diving into something called mesenchymal stem cell derived exosomes.
hmm
Sometimes you'll hear those called MSC derived exosomes. And we're going to take a really close look at what makes this specific option stand out. It's kind of like this. We're not just talking about stem cells themselves anymore. We're actually talking about these powerful signals that they send. And
Yes.
for all of you doctors and naturopaths and holistic practitioners out there, we're also going to break down all the important details, the things you need to know about legally offering this particular product to your patients, because that's important too, right?
Absolutely. This is really a hot topic right now. I think we're seeing a lot of excitement around regenerative medicine, and this is definitely a big part of it. It's not just another one of those passing fads in the wellness world. We're talking about what a lot of people see as the future of regenerative support. And like you said, it's not just about the science. For people who are actually using this in their practice in a clinical setting,
Right.
that legal side of things, or regulations around all of these advanced biologics, is super important.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics then. Um, what exactly are these MSC-derived exosomes? Can you break that down for us in simple terms?
Sure. Imagine them as these tiny little delivery systems, kind of like super small envelopes, or maybe you could even say like little bubbles.
Hmm.
And these are sent out by the mesenchymal stem cells.
Okay.
Shad Sherwood from Advanced Biologics, the company we're talking about today, he described them as shuttles carrying all this crucial cargo. So things like cytokines and growth factors and proteins, all these elements that are super important in how cells talk to each other and how they repair themselves.
So these little bubbles, if we can call them that for a minute, they're produced by MSCs, by those mesenchymal stem cells.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about this today, we're focusing on those exosomes that are specifically coming from these MSCs, right? The ones that are derived from them.
Exactly. Where they come from, that's really important.
Yeah.
Mesenchymal stem cells, they're kind of unique in the way that they can regenerate things.
Mm-hmm.
And to really grasp how powerful their exosomes are, I think it helps to take a step back and think about the MSCs themselves,
Okay.
especially when they're at their strongest. So Shad pointed out that when we're born, that's when we have the most MSCs, and they're at their most potent.
Oh, interesting.
It's like our bodies are naturally at their best when
Right.
it comes to repairing themselves when we're young.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like that analogy he used about a brand new car that comes with a really good warranty.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're young, your body can bounce back from almost anything, it seems like.
Right. And those young MSCs, they're super active,
Hmm.
and they're constantly sending out all these exosomes that are packed with signals for regeneration. And that's where all these incredible potential benefits come in. The list is pretty impressive, and it could really help with so many different health issues.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking about things like reducing inflammation, which is a huge factor in pain and a lot of chronic conditions.
Mm.
And these exosomes seem to be really important for repairing and regenerating different tissues all over the body. Skin, bones, muscles, even internal organs.
Absolutely. And they also play a role in keeping our immune system balanced, which is essential for overall health. Plus, they can even stimulate angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels, a critical process for healing and recovering from injuries.
Oh, wow.
And there's evidence that they could actually protect cells from damage. And this has some really promising implications, especially when it comes to heart health.
That's amazing. And what about the speed of healing? I've heard some pretty remarkable things.
Yeah, definitely. That wound care study they talked about suggested that wound healing could be sped up by like 350% to 500%. And that's not all. They can also break down scar tissue and potentially even reduce scarring, which is a big deal for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about acute injuries. These potential applications go way beyond that. We're talking about chronic conditions and degenerative diseases like arthritis and diabetes,
Right?
and even neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and dementia, which have always been so difficult to treat.
So let's dig a little deeper into how this actually works. How do these exosomes actually make these changes happen at the cellular level?
Okay, so think of it like a very targeted communication system.
Hmm.
When cells get injured or stressed, they send out these inflammatory signals. It's almost like they're sending an SOS. These signals can travel throughout the body, and they're picked up by the mesenchymal stem cells.
So the MSCs, they basically hear these distress calls.
Exactly. And then the MSCs get to work. They package up a concentrated dose of all those good things we talked about earlier, cytokines, growth factors, proteins, and they put them into exosomes. And then these exosomes are released by the MSCs, and they circulate until they find the damaged tissues. That's where they deliver their healing cargo.
That's fascinating. It's like a whole new way of thinking about how things work, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
The stem cells are like the factory producing all the good stuff, and then the exosomes are like these specialized delivery trucks taking it right to where it's needed.
That's a great analogy. And that difference, that's super important when you're thinking about how to actually use these therapies in a clinical setting. So let's talk about the key differences between using exosomes directly and using stem cells themselves. So traditional stem cell therapy, which you could kind of call regenerative medicine 1.0, it really depends on the stem cells being able to turn into different types of cells. This can be useful in certain cases, like when you're trying to repair a joint and your body needs new cartilage cells.
Okay.
But there are some things to think about with stem cell therapy, some limitations that are really important to understand. And this is why there's so much focus shifting towards exosomes.
Gotcha. What are some of those concerns?
So one of the big ones with stem cells is the risk, even if it's just theoretical, that they might actually make cancer grow faster.
Really?
Because stem cells haven't specialized yet, there's a chance, although there's debate about this, that they might not be able to tell the difference between a healthy cell and a cancer cell.
Uh-huh.
Another thing is that stem cells have DNA. So there's a chance that the body might reject them, like it can reject a transplanted organ. And Shad Sherwood from Advanced Biologics, he was very clear that using live stem cells directly that haven't been approved is actually against the law in the United States, at least for most clinical applications.
That's something really important for practitioners to keep in mind, for sure.
Absolutely. He also brought up a really interesting point about organ transplantation in the future.
Oh.
You know, someone has had stem cell therapy and their body has accepted DNA from a donor. It could complicate things if they ever need a transplant later on.
That's a good point. So how do MSC-derived exosomes stack up when it comes to these kinds of issues?
Well, this is where exosomes, which some people are calling regenerative medicine 2.0, really start to shine, especially when you're talking about safety and regulations.
Okay.
So exosomes, they don't actually turn into other types of cells. Their main job is to repair cells that are already damaged.
Oh, I see.
And that means that the risk that we talked about with stem cells and cancer, it's basically gone.
Gotcha. So what about rejection? Is that still a concern?
Not really. Exosomes don't have a nucleus or DNA, so the body's immune system doesn't see them as something foreign to attack like it might with donor stem cells.
That makes sense.
And studies have shown that exosomes might actually have even more growth factors than stem cells.
Really?
So potentially they could be even better at sending those healing signals.
Wow, so they're more powerful in a way.
Yeah, you can say that. And then there's the size difference, which is pretty significant too.
Okay.
Exosomes are unbelievably tiny, like 1,000 times smaller than stem cells. And that means they can get into places that stem cells just can't. Like, they can even cross the blood-brain barrier, which is a big deal.
That opens up a lot of possibilities, right?
Right.
Especially when it comes to those neurodegenerative conditions we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Conditions like dementia, Alzheimer's, ALS, traumatic brain injury, things that we used to think were irreversible.
Right.
They're now being looked at as potential targets for exosome therapy. And get this, exosomes can even act like a delivery service to the brain.
Oh, wow.
They could potentially carry medications across that barrier. And unlike stem cells, which can become less effective the more they're replicated in a lab, exosomes can be manufactured in a very controlled way so that they're always really potent.
That's pretty amazing. So this brings us to a really important point for our listeners, especially those who are doctors, naturopaths, or holistic practitioners. And that's the legal side of things, the regulations. We talked about Advanced Biologics earlier. Can you tell us why their approach is so relevant for practitioners who are thinking about using exosomes?
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Advanced Biologics has basically created a special spot for their product in the regulatory world. And what that means is that licensed practitioners are actually allowed to use it systemically. And this all comes down to how they're working with the FDA.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit more? What's the specific pathway they're using?
Sure. Advanced Biologics has chosen what's called the 351A regulatory pathway with the FDA. Now, this is the same path that pharmaceutical companies have to go through to get their drugs approved. It's really rigorous, and it requires a lot of evidence to prove that the product is safe, effective, and consistently manufactured to a high standard. And that involves a lot of preclinical and clinical data.
Wow, so it's like they're treating this product almost like a drug.
In a way, yeah. And this level of scrutiny, this oversight from the FDA, it's way more intense than what you see with other pathways for biological products.
I see. And you mentioned that they also maintain an FDA drug master file.
Hmm.
What does that mean exactly?
So having a drug master file, or DMF, with the FDA, it's a really big deal. It's not easy to get. Advanced Biologics actually said it took them 2.5 years.
Hmm.
And basically, the DMF is like this big confidential file that has all the details about how they manufacture their product, their facilities, their quality control processes, all that stuff.
Okay.
So by having a DMF, Advanced Biologics is basically giving the FDA full transparency into how their product is made. It's like saying, hey, look, we're doing everything by the book. And because they're following this 351A pathway and they have a DMF, the FDA is keeping a very close eye on them. Every single batch of their product has to be reviewed and approved by the FDA before it can be used clinically.
Wow.
That level of scrutiny, it really gives you a lot of confidence in the product's safety and quality.
Definitely. And I heard that their testing protocols are also really strict.
Absolutely. Testing is super important. Advanced Biologics requires third-party testing on every single batch of their MSC exosomes. And the results of those tests, they go straight to the FDA. And here's the thing. If a batch doesn't meet their standards for potency and quality, they throw it out, even if it costs them a lot of money.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, they give an example of a batch that was worth like $800,000 that they had to destroy because it didn't meet the potency requirements. So they're not messing around when it comes to quality control.
That's impressive. And for practitioners, they provide a certificate of analysis with every order, right?
Yes, exactly. So with each order, they include a COA. It's basically a document that gives practitioners and their patients all the details about that specific batch of exosomes. So things like the results of that third-party testing. And this is really important because it shows that Advanced Biologics has gone above and beyond to make sure that their product is safe and effective. And because they're going through the 351A process, they've got that FDA drug master file and they're doing all this testing. Doctors, naturopaths, and holistic practitioners can legally use this product with their patients.
That's huge.
It really is. And the FDA has officially classified their product as a drug, so it's totally legal to use it for injections in a clinical setting. They also guarantee that their product has at least 20 billion MSC exosomes per milliliter and over 700 growth factors.
Wow. It sounds like they've really thought of everything. And what about the source of their mesenchymal stem cells? I understand that their partnership with LSU Medical School is a big advantage.
Yes, that's right. They get access to really high-quality umbilical cords through their partnership with LSU Medical School.
Hmm.
And they're super picky about their donors. The mothers have to be 35 or younger. They have to be having a planned C-section.
Yeah.
And they do all these tests to make sure the mothers are healthy. And one thing that's interesting is that they don't use stem cells from mothers who've been vaccinated for COVID-19.
Oh, wow.
So they're getting their stem cells from this part of the umbilical cord called Wharton's jelly. And it's like top-notch quality.
Yeah.
And then their manufacturing process, that's something special too. They harvest the stem cells right away as soon as the baby's born in a lab that's right next to the hospital.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is. Some other companies, they use frozen tissue bank material, but that can sometimes affect how well the cells work. And Advanced Biologics, they also have a very specific way of replicating the cells. They only do it for 3 generations to make sure the potency stays consistent. And they have a whole process to make sure the cells produce tons of growth factors. They actually claim that their product has way more growth factors than other products out there.
That's really interesting. Can we go back to those two different pathways for a minute, the 351A and the 361? Because it sounds like that's the main reason why Advanced Biologics is in such a strong position legally. Can you explain a little bit more about why that distinction is so important?
Yeah, of course. So basically, these are the 2 main routes that companies can take when they're dealing with biological products.
Okay.
The 351A path, the one Advanced Biologics chose, it's the tougher one. You have to show that your product actually works. You have to do a bunch of studies to prove that it's safe. And then you have to keep monitoring its safety even after it's out there.
Yeah.
And Advanced Biologics, they've said that they haven't seen any serious side effects, and there's no risk of overdosing, at least according to their studies.
That's good to know.
But all of this, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. We're talking years of research and millions of dollars. But the benefit of all that hard work is that products that go through the 351A process, like these MSC exosomes from Advanced Biologics,
Right.
They can be legally used for injections and other systemic applications as long as it's done by a licensed practitioner.
I see. So it's like they've earned that right by being so thorough.
Exactly. Now, the other path, the 361 path, that's where you find most of the other exosome products on the market.
Okay.
And this one, it doesn't have nearly as many requirements. Companies don't have to prove that their product works. They don't have to do as much safety testing. So it's a lot cheaper and faster to get their product out there. But the catch is that products that go through the 361 pathway can only be used topically, like on the skin.
Oh, so you can't inject them.
Right. Injecting them is a big no-no, and it could get practitioners into serious legal trouble.
That's a crucial distinction, and it's really important information for any doctor, naturopath, or holistic practitioner who's thinking about using exosome therapies.
Absolutely.
So let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked about the science, we've talked about the legalities, but what about the actual benefits for patients? What are some of the therapeutic advantages of MSC-derived exosomes that would be particularly appealing to these types of practitioners?
So one of the great things about these therapies is that they really tap into the body's natural ability to heal itself, which is a core principle for a lot of holistic approaches.
Right.
Now, they might not be a cure-all, especially for conditions that are genetic, but there's a lot of potential for managing symptoms, helping people function better, and improving their quality of life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the fact that they could be used for so many different health issues, that makes them relevant for practitioners from all sorts of specialties.
Absolutely. And for those listening who are specifically interested in using Advanced Biologics MSC exosomes, what are some of the key benefits for them? Besides the legal clarity that we've already discussed, of course.
Sure, there are a few things that really stand out. First, it's a super advanced approach to regenerative medicine that's totally natural and works in harmony with the body. And that's something that a lot of holistic practitioners look for. It's also non-invasive, meaning you don't have to do surgery. And you've got options. You can give it through an IV, inject it, or even apply it topically. And there's potential for anti-aging and aesthetic benefits too, so it's a good option for med spas and aesthetic practitioners.
Oh, interesting.
And then there's pain management and joint support, which is a huge area for a lot of practitioners. Plus, it can help regulate the immune system and control inflammation, which is really important in integrative and functional medicine. And because we're talking about cellular products, there's no ethical concerns about using fetal tissue, and there's no risk of rejection, which is a big deal.
That's great.
It's true. And from a business perspective, using these exosomes could really boost revenue and help practitioners keep their patients happy because they're offering such advanced treatments. And the best part is these exosomes can be used for all sorts of things: wellness, recovery, aesthetics, orthopedics, neurosupport, even hormone balance. Pretty versatile. And for practitioners who really want to be on the cutting edge of regenerative medicine, this is a chance to become a leader in this exciting field.
Definitely. So for those who are intrigued and want to learn more, what's the next step? How can they get started?
Well, Advanced Biologics has this fantastic consultant, Seon Baptiste. He's certified to work with practitioners, and he's there to help them integrate these MSC exosomes into their practice smoothly.
Oh, that's helpful.
He's got all the info, he can answer any questions, and he can guide them through the whole process. People can connect with them on LinkedIn or through his link tree.
Great. So to recap, for all the doctors, naturopaths, and holistic practitioners out there, Advanced Biologics has really set themselves apart when it comes to the legal side of things. Because of all the work they've done with the FDA, going through that 351A pathway, having that drug master file, and doing all that rigorous testing, you can actually offer these MSC-derived exosomes to your patients legally, and you can give them through injection.
Yes.
That's not something you see with a lot of the other exosome products out there, so it's a big deal.
It is. It means you can confidently address all sorts of health and wellness needs with this next generation product that's been through the ringer when it comes to safety and potency. And they're following all the FDA guidelines and quality control standards.
Exactly. And as all of you keep working hard to provide the best and most legally sound treatments for your patients, we really want you to think about this. How could using an FDA-regulated MSC exosome product like this one from Advanced Biologics, one that's been so thoroughly vetted, how could it change the outcomes for your patients? And how could it shape the future of your practice as regenerative medicine keeps evolving? It's definitely something worth exploring. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.